All right, are you ready to dive into this draft version too?
Yeah, let's do it.
You sent over an audio recording,
Mm-hmm.
and it's absolutely packed with information about all the new features.
Yeah.
So we're going to break it all down for you and figure out how these changes
Right.
can level up your writing process.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
But there are some seriously cool updates in here.
Yeah, one of the first things that jumped out at me
Okay.
was the new tabbed interface.
Right?
It's a big change from how Draft used to work.
It is. Yeah, they've completely moved away from that single document view.
Okay.
Now you can have multiple documents open in tabs,
Okay.
just like in a web browser.
I see.
And think about how much smoother your workflow will be when you can effortlessly switch between your character bios, your dialogue trees, and your game script,
Right.
all without losing your place.
Yeah, that's a huge time saver right there.
Definitely.
And speaking of saving time, the new document picker sounds amazing.
It's a game changer.
Yeah.
Especially for those of us who work on massive projects with tons of files. You just hit Ctrl+P,
Okay.
and boom, you've got a searchable list of every single document in your project.
So if you've got hundreds of documents,
Yep.
does it handle it okay?
Absolutely. You can filter by document type,
Okay.
like scripts, GDDs, dialogue trees, even media.
Okay.
And get this, it remembers your preferences.
Oh, wow.
So if you're constantly working with character dialogue scripts, it'll
Yeah.
prioritize those the next time you use the picker.
That's so smart.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about those revisions.
Okay.
You mentioned they're great for multi-user setups.
Right.
But what's the benefit for someone who mainly works solo?
Think of the revision system as your personal time machine.
Okay.
You've probably been there, you make a bunch of changes, and then you realize you completely messed something up.
Oh, yeah.
But with Draft version 2, every time you hit save, it creates a snapshot of your document.
Right.
So you can go back and restore any previous version. No problem.
But does that eat up a lot of storage space?
That's a great question. It doesn't store every single change.
Okay.
It keeps the most recent 15 revisions, which is more than enough for most situations.
Yeah.
Plus, it only stores the differences between revisions, so it's not as space hungry as you might think.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I have to ask about the diff buffer.
Okay.
What's the map behind that?
It's not having a super-powered undo button.
Okay.
It tracks every single change you make to a document.
Wow.
So you can undo and redo to your heart's content. You'll never have to worry about accidentally deleting a crucial line of dialogue or a brilliant plot twist ever again.
It's like a safety net.
Yes, exactly.
All right, let's shift gears and talk about content creation.
Okay.
What's the deal with the switch to a Markdown-based editor for GDDs?
Markdown is a really simple way to format text.
Okay.
It uses plain text characters to create headings, lists, bold text, and all that good stuff. No more messing around with complicated menu options.
So it's like a streamlined version of a word processor.
Right.
But specifically designed for GDDs.
Exactly, but here's the really cool part. You can insert links to other documents directly within your GDDs.
Interesting.
So for example, you can link a character's name to their full bio or a plot point to the relevant scene in your game.
So I'm reading through a GDD and I see a character name I want to learn more about. I can click and go right to their bio.
That's exactly it. It's all about making connections and keeping your project organized.
Now, managing media files can be a real headache for writers.
Oof, tell me about it.
But Draft version 2 has a clever solution, right?
Right, they've introduced the concept of attachments.
Okay.
So instead of embedding media directly into a document, which can make the file size huge and slow things down,
Yeah.
you link it to a separate attachment document.
So if I'm working on a character bio and I want to include a reference image,
Yeah.
I'd create a separate attachment for that image and then link to it within the bio.
Precisely, and this approach keeps your documents clean and organized. And on the back end, Draft uses this really cool library called Sharp to handle image processing.
Sharp library.
It basically means Draft automatically optimizes your images behind the scenes. It handles things like resizing and compression,
Okay.
so you get the best image quality without sacrificing performance. It takes all the technical hassle out of your hand.
So that's good for someone like me
Right.
who's not a tech expert.
Exactly. It's all about making your life easier so you can focus on what really matters, the writing.
And speaking of make the life easier, what's the story behind those script editor enhancements?
They've added some really clever features to the script editor, especially for those of us who spend a lot of time writing dialogue.
Okay.
For example, there's now auto-completion for commands and actors.
So as I'm typing, it will suggest
Yeah.
things that I might want to type next.
You got no more racking your brain trying to remember the exact syntax for a command or the name of that minor character who appears for 2 lines. And remember that document picker we talked about?
Yeah.
It comes into play here too. You can use it to insert links to other documents directly into your scripts.
So if I'm writing a scene and I want to reference a specific prop or location,
Right.
I can just jump right to that.
Exactly. It's all about creating a seamless flow of information and making your project a cohesive whole.
This is starting to sound like the ultimate writing tool.
It really is, and we haven't even touched on the dialogue editor yet. They completely overhauled it for version 2, and it's incredible.
Okay, spill the tea.
All right.
What's so revolutionary about this new dialogue editor?
They've rebuilt it from the ground up using something called the React Flow library.
React Flow library.
Yeah, it's basically a way to create these really intuitive node-based editors. And in the case of the dialogue editor, it means you can visually map out your conversations, create complex branching paths, and connect everything together in a way that's both powerful and easy to understand.
So instead of just writing lines of dialogue, I'm actually building a visual flowchart of the conversation.
You got it, but it's not just a visual upgrade. The new dialogue editor is packed with tons of practical features.
Oh, cool.
For example, you now have enhanced undo redo support within the dialogue editor,
Okay.
just like in the main document editor.
So it's like having a super undo button
Exactly.
in the dialogue editor.
Yeah, but here's where it gets really interesting. Nodes are now customizable.
Nodes remind me what those are.
The nodes are those little boxes that represent different points in the conversation,
Okay.
and you can now add titles notes and even adjust the inputs and outputs of each node.
I see.
This gives you incredible control over the flow of the dialogue.
So if I wanted to add a little note to myself,
Mm-hmm.
I could just attach it directly to that node.
Exactly. You can even link nodes directly to existing scripts. So let's say you have a node where a character tells a story about a past event.
Right.
You could link that node directly to the script for that event, creating a seamless transition between the dialogue and the narrative.
Wow, that's incredible. It's like building an interactive choose-your-own-adventure story, but for dialogue.
Yes, exactly.
And for those really complex conversations, does Draft version 2 have anything to make that easier?
They've introduced something called the jump node.
Okay.
So imagine you have this massive sprawling dialogue tree with branches going everywhere.
Right.
It can get really messy trying to follow all those lines.
Yeah, I bet.
That's where the jump node comes in. It lets you create a direct link between two distant nodes, cluttering up the diagram with a bunch of arrows.
So it's like a shortcut.
Yeah, like teleporting across the conversation,
Okay.
cutting out all the unnecessary steps.
I like it.
And to make things even better, they've revamped the dialogue player.
Okay.
It now displays choices within the flow itself, making it much easier to visualize and test your conversations.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah.
All right, this is all starting to sound pretty amazing.
It is.
But we haven't talked about actors yet. What's new on that front?